Good afternoon. The word consciousness is the most important word in the message of the infinite way. True, it is the most difficult to understand, and you need not be surprised if it takes years and years and years to catch a glimpse of its meaning, because there is no other place in the religious or philosophical or mystical literature or language of the world where the word consciousness is actually the secret and the foundation. Just as it is rightly said that if you can name it, it isn't God. Any name that you would try to give to God, be assured isn't God. Even the name God itself isn't God. Nor is soul or spirit or mind or principle or love. None of these are God. These are merely words describing God as if God could be described. Actually, what they are words revealing certain facets of God. Love is certainly one of the aspects of God, and so is intelligence, and so is law. But to say that any one of these is God would be to leave out all the others. And even if you summed up all of the synonyms that you know for God, you still haven't God, because God is infinite. And therefore, there are lots of words you haven't learned yet, or haven't been coined yet. But if you knew 1,000 more words, you would not have the allness of God. In other words, there is no way at all, to attain an understanding of God that would be God. You can, however, experience God, and then this is God. But when you experience it, you can't describe it. I know that there are millions and millions of novels and stories in the world about love, but nobody has ever been able to describe falling in love. And be assured that trying to reach God is more difficult than that. Therefore, when we have come to an end of words, we discover that there is something that is not a word, but is ourself. And that word is I. I is not a word. I is me, myself. I am not a word. Now that must be clear. I am not a word. I am being. Therefore, when Moses attained the revelation that I am, he attained the experience that went beyond words, because I isn't a word. I is me. I is my own self. I is the being that I am. And therefore, with that word I, God is revealed. Because there is no word behind I, nor in front of it. I is I. I am I. And therefore, I am not projecting an image of thought when I say I. I am announcing myself. If I say life, I am saying life. If I say mind, I am saying mind. If I say God, I am saying God. And therefore I am uttering words. But I isn't a word. I is the individual uttering the words. Therefore, when we come to the Master, we do not find him giving a new revelation to the world. We do not find him saying anything at all that was heretofore unknown. He says, I am that I am. I am the way, the truth, the life. I am the bread, the meat, the wine, the water. The Master then declares I. Therefore, he could ultimately reveal that which Moses knew, that I and the Father are one because I am that one. Not two, one. And that one, I. As you study, if you are ever called upon to do it, as you study or read the mystical revelations of the world, whether they are of the Orient or the Occident, you will discover that I reveals God. All of the mystical poetry of the world, I reveals God. Every time I is used, it is as God announcing itself. Now, the next question that comes up is this. I can say I about myself. You can say I about yourself. But the next question is, what am I? Who am I? Where am I? What is my function? Who am I? What am I? Now this is the mystery. This is the mystery of the ages, because the temple in Greece has over its doors, O man, know thyself, and thou hast found God. So the mystery deepens. Here we find in Greece, that if I know myself, I know God. And so again, we search, because to our senses, it is very definite that I am not God. It is very definite that you are not God. Because if you search your senses, what you know of yourself with your mind, you certainly are not going to believe for a minute that that could be God. And therefore, you say, the mystery deepens. I am God, or else all of the revelations of the world are wrong. And yet, as I know myself, I definitely am not God. I know all of my own weaknesses. I know all of my own faults. So, do not try to tell me that which I know as Joel is God, because that isn't even funny. Therefore, I must go deeper. And eventually I discover that which I have known as Joel and that which you know as Joel definitely is not God. But as a matter of fact, it wasn't me. That is some false idea that I am entertaining of myself and that you are entertaining of me. But it is not myself. Because now, on examination, I find areas of myself that need to be investigated further. I haven't met those before. All I have met is what was in my mind and what was in my body. But now I'm commencing to discover parts of myself that I never knew before. Eventually, this led me to see that I am really not a body, because even without a body I would be intact. But I am conscious of something. I am conscious of a world about me, a physical world. And I can identify sun, moon, stars, earth, forms, human life, vegetable life, animal life. But then I'm conscious of something else. I am conscious of thoughts. Thoughts that do not concern things. I'm conscious of thoughts. Well, thoughts of love, thoughts of benevolence, thoughts of charity, thoughts of fellowship, thoughts of fraternalness, brotherly love. These are not concrete physical forms. I am now conscious of something in the mental realm, something in the form of ideas, relationships. I am conscious of prayer. All of a sudden, I become conscious of something called prayer. I don't mean the words and thoughts that go to make up prayer. I mean a feeling within me, a feeling that's sort of reaching out, and then a feeling that responds. And all of a sudden, I recognize it as communion. I and my Father are communing. The Father within me. I, Joel, find myself with something unidentifiable within. Peaceful, sometimes joyous, freeing. And I recognize this as communion. I recognize it as prayer, meditation. And so I find myself now conscious not only of that which is in this physical realm, or the thoughts or ideas of the mental realm, but now I am becoming conscious of a realm that is beyond things and thoughts, that which I can't see and can't even think. And I have to ascribe to it the word feeling. But yet it isn't feeling in the sense of touch. Therefore, it must be feeling in the sense of emotion, or feeling in the sense of awareness. And so I come back to myself, and it didn't happen in these few minutes. It happened over a period of years. All that I am describing in these few minutes that ultimately led to the revelation, I am consciousness, because all there is to me is being conscious of. Take that away from me and I have no existence. Even if my body walked the earth, I would have no existence unless I were conscious of it. But if I am conscious only of a physical universe, I am an animal. And I am living on the animal level of life, aware of nothing but physicality in one form or another. And this is the stage of some of our ancestors. In the cave-dwelling days, prehistoric days, we know that this was their state of consciousness. We know that they lived entirely by force and feelings, physical feelings. We can trace in history when the mental era began, when they began to discover mathematics, road building, temple building, pyramid building. You see, the mind is now open. And so we have men living in an era when they are both mental and physical beings. They are mental beings living through the physical body. They are mental beings erecting a physical universe. And these men have no awareness of anything beyond that. As far as they are concerned, all there is mind and matter, intelligence and form. And then eventually enters the scene a something. And this is a very strange something. The first record we have of it is in India. And it is a root word, KR, in Sanskrit. And KR is the root word for Krishna. And today, Krishna is presumably the first man on earth to have broken through to the spiritual realm. But Krishna wasn't a man. Krishna was the divine consciousness which broke through into the mind of a man and then was identified as if it were a man. But it wasn't. It was consciousness. It was the divine or spiritual consciousness which broke through, permeated the mind of an individual, bringing to light the first spiritual awareness or fourth dimensional awareness. Now, the marvelous thing about this is that the word Christ is CHR, which is the same root as KR and has the same meaning, light or enlightenment. And so we have today Christ accepted as a man, but it wasn't. Christ is the illumined, infinite, divine consciousness, or God, breaking through the mind of an individual and appearing as man, but not man. Christ, light, illumined consciousness. So we have later, well, not later than Christ, 500 years BC, we have Buddha, again a word meaning light, enlightenment, receiving that same consciousness of Krishna. And wherever the light appears, be assured, it is that original infinite divine consciousness which has broken through, and an individual has become aware of it. Just as the animal man, originally aware only of body and things, later becomes a mental being aware of mathematics, astronomy, architecture, beauty, philosophy. So you see, the mental and the physical man, who really was never a mental or physical man, but was a state of consciousness at those levels, now breaks through the limitation of the mind and, as the Master told the disciples, to remain in the city until you're endowed from on high. This is what happens when a person who is partly mental and partly physical being all of a sudden receives light, illumination, initiation, call it whatever you will, is endowed from on high, and now has broken through, and is not merely conscious of a physical world and a mental world, but is conscious now of a spiritual world. So that whether you are speaking of the physical man, the animal man, wasn't he a state of physical consciousness? And when you reach that same man breaking through and beginning to perceive philosophy or religion or mathematics, can you not see that he was now the same man, only conscious of a higher degree of life? He no longer lived by the pains and pleasures of the body alone. Some of those still remained, but remember, he now entered a world where there were pains and pleasures of the mind. When that same individual is endowed from on high, or breaks through and becomes conscious of the spiritual realm, that individual still, to some extent, knows pains and pleasures of the body, pains and pleasures of the mind, but to this now comes the greater pleasures, the awareness of the spirit, consciousness of the spirit. Therefore, I am consciousness. And as consciousness, I am conscious of my body, I am conscious of my mind, I am also conscious of my spirit and of my soul. I am conscious of the physical realm of life, I am conscious of the mental realm of life, but I am also conscious now in some measure of the spiritual realm of life, so that I can tabernacle, I can commune with the Spirit. The Spirit of God can bear witness with my spirit. The Spirit of God becomes one with my spirit. The life of God becomes one with my life. And in this communion, I can be as much at home in the realm that the human being doesn't even know exists, and would deny if you were to tell him. I have had the experience of having a college professor tell me there is no such realm. He knows it because he never experienced it. Now, the moment that I know that I am consciousness, I know, of course, that the reason I am consciousness must be that God is consciousness, for I and the Father are one. There cannot be a God and a man. There cannot be an offspring separate and apart from its basic substance. Certainly not in face of all the mystical revelation that all that God is, I am, all that the Father hath is mine, I and the Father are one, thou seest me, thou seest the Father that sent me. All of this testifies to the fact that the man who went up to heaven and the man who came down from heaven are the same. Because man never left heaven, except to wander in a dream. So it has been revealed to me that the story of the prodigal son in the Bible is not what it appears to be. It is not the story of an individual who left his father's house and returned. It is the story of human consciousness that left its father's house to wander on earth, setting up a selfhood of its own, and finally coming to the place of creating those wonderful things that it now wonders if it won't destroy its life. See what a world I have made me. I have split the atom. I have created the greatest power there is on earth, and now I'm afraid it's going to devour me. Frankenstein, the human mind, creating its own destruction, bringing itself to a feast with the swine. And now, not only individually, but collectively saying, where do we go from here? Now that we've made this great power, we don't control it. We fear it. And so, at this moment, you may be assured that the human mind is eating its banquet with the swine. It is at the lowest ebb it has ever been in the history of the world. It doesn't know if it can survive till tomorrow. And you can be assured of this, that in the back of that mind it is saying, I wish I were in my Father's house. Or is there a Father's house for me to return to? And so you may be assured of this, consciously or unconsciously, the entire world at this moment is reaching out for spiritual light, to get away from the Frankenstein it has created. Now, there is only one return, and there is only one way of return. If you have made a poison and you are afraid of it, if you have made a bomb and you're afraid of it, if you have created an ideology and you are now afraid of it, there is only one return, and that is to the realization that I am consciousness, not form. I am consciousness, not mind. But the consciousness that I am is God. And this consciousness governs all form. So I need no longer fear the poison or the bomb or the ideology, for the consciousness that is God is the master of all form. I, consciousness, have overcome the world. Then, in the realization that that consciousness, that basic consciousness, which we call Krishna or Christ, is the consciousness of individual man, with that recognition, there soon begins the percolating of it inside of you until it becomes realized. You may first accept it intellectually, that not only are you this physical person you can see in the mirror, not only are you this mental person that can sit down and read and write and think and plan and create, but if nothing further, then intellectually you can accept this, that except for consciousness I wouldn't even know myself as body or mind. So behind the body and the mind there must be the consciousness that is knowing me as body and mind. And that consciousness which knows me as body and mind, I am. That is the being that I am. That which knows me as mind and body. That which through me is conscious, not only of physical form and mental form, but of the things of God. And now, you receive the confirmation of it, and with this confirmation, probably the realization that as the child of God, you know the things of God. As the consciousness or offspring of God, and only as that can you know the things of God. With your body, you will never know God or the things of God, and with your mind, you'll never know God or the things of God.
No.
Because this is the natural man that knoweth not the things of God and receiveth not the things of God. But the Son of God is the heir of God. The Son of God knoweth the things of God and receiveth the things of God, and therefore there is an area of me, of my consciousness, of the consciousness that I am, that can and must eventually come to know the things of God just as much as it knows the things of the mental and the physical realm. You see, in the mystical life, you do not disdain the physical realm. You do not belittle the mental realm. You realize that to be the whole man, there must be all three parts of us. There must be that infinite divine consciousness which gives us our soul integrity, our love for our neighbor. Did you ever stop to think that a human being cannot love his neighbor as himself? Have you never stopped to think how impossible that is? Might be able to love the neighbor he likes, but he'd be very choosy about the neighbor that he's going to love as himself. Have you not stopped to think that it is absolutely impossible to pray for your enemies as a human being? That if you do, it's only lip service? Do you not see that it is only as the soul of God is your soul that you can really love your neighbor as yourself and not care whether it's a friendly neighbor or enemy neighbor or male neighbor or female neighbor, but actually love, but in the sense that God loves. Do you not know that humanly we couldn't forgive 70 times 7? As a matter of fact, probably he said 70 times 7 knowing that we would try to forgive once, twice, 7 times 14 wouldn't succeed. And he hoped that if we could get up to forgiving 70 times 7, it might really click. But it won't. No, it won't. Even if you do it 70 times 7, it won't be forgiveness. It'll never be forgiveness until you're forgiving through your soul, through that part of you which is divine, through that part of you which actually knows that humanly you've got plenty of faults of your own. And as you would be forgiven, so you can forgive. You see, it is the infinite way that has brought to light that the nature of our selfhood is consciousness. Where the consciousness is aware at the physical or mental level, behind both must be the consciousness that is aware. And it is the infinite way that is revealed that there can only be one consciousness. And that therefore, that consciousness which calls or which is known as God is the consciousness known as man, and eventually must become one in recognition. Now do not forget this. There is nothing new in the revelation that I and my Father are one. The fault with it is that we've been led to believe that Joel and his father is one. And all of a sudden he wants to flap his wings and fly like the angels, and finds he can't even walk on water. And so, further light is necessary. It has also been revealed that there is but one consciousness, and that consciousness is God. Now bring that down to the consciousness that is God is the consciousness that I am. And you have your oneness, then you can relax your personal efforts. Now you can relax from taking thought for your life, what you shall eat, what you shall drink, wherewithal you shall be clothed. Why should you take thought when the consciousness that formed you is responsible for maintaining and sustaining you? You can relax in His Spirit, in His wisdom, because His Spirit and His wisdom are yours. These are one and not two. Now, if I am purely a physical being, then people will speak of me as being either strong or weak, meaning I have either a strong body or a weak body. If I have risen into the mental realm, and then more especially if I'm a bit more mental than physical, then they will speak of me as intelligent or not too intelligent, a greater degree of intelligence or a lesser degree of intelligence. But if I have ascended to my Father's house, if I have returned to my Father's house, and I have recognized that God is my soul, God is the consciousness which I am, then some will perceive that there is more to me than body and mind. They will perceive something of a spiritual nature, impersonal nature, universal nature, And if they do, it will mean that they too have begun to ascend above the physical and mental realms, because now they too possess the discernment that only the Son of God has, the ability to behold the things of God, to receive the things of God, to receive the knowledge of God, to become aware. Well, this really is what is meant by angels. A person who has received some measure of spiritual light has ascended above being humanly human. Not entirely, but they have ascended at least to the realization of spiritual identity. And this, we are told, makes them a little lower than the angels. As a matter of fact, it makes them angels, because that is all there is in this world to angels, are spiritually illumined individuals. Believe me, Jesus was an angel, and Moses was an angel, and Elijah was an angel, and Elisha was an angel, Isaiah was an angel, John was an angel. Be assured of that although they lived mentally and physically, that the greatest part of their life was lived in their spiritual illumination. Now, in proportion as I can see that in them, it means I have attained some measure of spiritual discernment myself, so that I can tabernacle and know the things of God. And so it is that in any moment when you are giving spiritual help to anyone, if you can become unaware of their humanness, and even momentarily aware of their spiritual identity or nature or form, in that degree you have become the child of God, heir of God, and able now to know, discern the things of God. And from there on, it is a matter of development, continuing in the Word, deepening, ripening, enriching, until more and more and more you are living not in the body, just using the body for all the purposes that it was given to us to use, and not in the mind, although you continue to use the mind for every purpose that it was meant, but also having those moments of ascension above the body and above the mind, that which scripturally is called absent from the body and present with the Lord. Absent from physical sense, absent even from mental sense, and discerning the things of God, the laws of God. You know, the only way it could ever have been discovered that actually there is only one power is through spiritual discernment. The natural man couldn't have discovered that, because the human mind is faced with two powers at every side, in the physical realm and in the mental realm. Therefore, unless someone had ascended above the physical and mental realm, they never would have discerned that God is the only power, Spirit is the only power. They never would have discerned the non-power of temporal power. It begins when you stop trying to know God with your mind, when you are willing to acknowledge God is, And if I go any further than that, I'm building an image of God in my mind. The moment I would say God is love, or God is life, or God is power, I am building an image in my mind. And this is idolatry. But the moment I can relax in God is, I'm not trying to brace infinity within the confines of a thought. I'm accepting whatever God is as is, and then letting that is define itself to me. It is in this way that ultimately the revelation came to me of the word I. Because always I too had been having words out there. And then thinking that I was worshiping God because I knew words like soul and spirit and mind and truth, and all of which were just mental images and thought. I might just as well carve them out of wood and had mind, life, truth, love on a mantelpiece and worship them. What was the difference on the mantelpiece or up in my head? They were finite concepts. But ultimately, the revelation struck me. How is it there is no word beyond I? I isn't a concept. I isn't a word in my mind. I is myself. Since I and the Father are one, and there is only one I, God must be myself. That makes sense. That makes sense because something is functioning as Joel. And what could it be but God? What could it be but God functioning as the Son? S-O-N. And then when we turn to the Master, we discover that God is the Father and God is the Son, and so I know the revelation is true. I is God and I is myself, because God is the Father and God is the Son. In order then to live this, Joel must stop taking thought. Otherwise, Joel is trying to play God. That's very dangerous. Joel must stop taking thought as to what the weather will be, as to what the business will be, as to what the plans will be. And Joel must let God reveal His will, His plan, His life. Therefore, Joel is consciousness, conscious of that which comes through from consciousness. The consciousness I am. And this gave us our infinite way interpretation of prayer as being that which has no words and no thoughts. Because words and thoughts are an attempt to influence God. They're opinions, theories, beliefs. Therefore, prayer has no words and no thoughts. But in a wordless, thoughtless prayer, God can speak words because God says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. So all I have to do is rid myself of my thoughts and receive God's thoughts. And His thoughts constitute the Word that is power. Then prayer must be without ceasing. It must be an attitude of consciousness. It must be a continuous listening. Not neglecting anything out here, but reserving a little bit, a little area there. Is always alert for the still small voice. This is praying without ceasing. It is listening for the still small voice. It is being still and knowing that I, back there, is God. And then we live by prayer. Prayer then functions our life. Prayer is the Word of God, the Spirit that beareth witness with our spirit, that goes before us. Now, to return to the Father's house, please remember that I and the Father are one, and God consciousness and my individual consciousness constitute that oneness. And in proportion as I am listening, I am being conscious of God. I'm being consciously aware of the presence of God, of the power of God, of the reality of God, of the joy of God, of the Spirit of God, of the life of God, of the wisdom of God. In my body and in my mind, I cannot know the things of God. Recognizing myself as consciousness, adopting the listening ear, which is the attitude of consciousness, I become the child of God that is the Son of God, the heir of God, joint heir to all the heavenly riches, because all that the Father hath is mine. Thank you.